remarkable to see such a seismic change in just a week with a new candidate on the top of the ticket. What's got your attention?
Well, that's just what it is, Joe. It is a seismic shift. The motivation quotient, the number of voters who said they were now more motivated to vote, and they are exactly the voters the Democrats need to win an election. They are voters under 34. They are Hispanic voters. They are black voters. That is sort of the Obama coalition that led him to the White House in 2008. And those people were the people Biden was losing in droves. Young people were upset mostly about the war in Gaza. Hispanic voters were leaning toward Trump's economic ideas. Black voters were disillusioned with Biden, thinking that he didn't live up to his promises. But now you've got Kamala Harris in there, and 65% of black voters said they were more motivated to vote in this election. Wow. And that very well could make the difference, especially in states like Georgia, where, if black voters stayed home, if a lot of Atlanta residents stayed home, then the rural Trump base, the Marjorie Taylor Greene's district and things like that, would go for Trump and dominate. But if black voter turnout in Atlanta is now what we expect from seeing this poll 100 days from now, it could be a very different picture.
And of course, as we mentioned, Harris is in Atlanta this evening for a rally. She said on her way there that she has not yet made a decision about a vice presidential pick. And looking at our polling, knowing that the governor of North Carolina, where she is lagging behind Trump, took himself out of consideration on his own last night. And she's also behind in just one other state, Pennsylvania. What is the implication there for potentially thoughts around Governor Josh Shapiro?
Right. Well, that certainly makes him, in play for the vice presidency. Pennsylvania is one of those three critical states, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, that any candidate, Republican or Democrat, has to win in order to get the 270 electoral votes. There are other weird paths, but those three are the primary states. So if she's doing well in Michigan and she's doing well in Wisconsin, then she needs to win Pennsylvania. Josh Shapiro is a very popular governor there, a Democratic governor in a state with the legislature is mixed, but he's gotten a lot of bipartisan legislation done. And I think she'll also need to address what Trump is now criticizing her for about remarks she had when she first ran for president in 2019, that she was against fracking, which is huge in Pennsylvania. So she'll have to make up for that. The other thing is, on the vice presidential pick, is she is very vulnerable on immigration and the border. So that makes me look to Arizona, where, yes, she's up by 2 in our poll right now. But Mark Kelly, the senator from Arizona, is very moderate on immigration and, might also help quash those criticisms from the Trump camp.
We're tight for time. I just have to mention Michigan. If you're with us on Bloomberg TV or on YouTube, you see up 11 points.
Yeah.
This, realizing, could be an outlier, but a remarkable number in a state that could decide this election, Wendy.
Absolutely. We were surprised by that number, and it's hard to tell, given the size of the polling, what drove that. Among the things that we saw elsewhere in the poll, though, is that voters trust Harris more to depart a little from Biden's policy on Israel and Gaza. And remember, in Michigan, there was that uncommitted vote largely over Gaza. So Dearborn, Michigan, which has a big Arab population, could go for that. And then, of course, there's the black voter enthusiasm in Detroit.
All right, very good points. Bloomberg's Wendy Benjaminson on this poll day. Thank you so much. Meantime, both the Harris and Trump campaigns launching multi-million-dollar ad buys today. Here's a taste.
The one thing Kamala Harris has always been: fearless.
This is America's border czar, and she's failed us. Under Harris, over 10 million illegally here.
As a prosecutor, she put murderers and abusers behind bars.
Kamala Harris failed, weak, dangerously liberal.
Joining us now for more is Bloomberg campaign finance reporter Bill Allison. So, Bill, these are pretty big buys, $50 million for the Harris campaign, starting with $12 million for Trump. And what we know is they have still hundreds of millions, realistically, to work with here.
Yeah, of course. Kamala Harris just raised $200 million in the first week of her campaign as the top of the ticket. They're spending a huge amounts of money in battleground states. Right now, there's like 5 states where about 93% of the spending is concentrated, and that's the blue wall states of Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. You're also seeing a lot of spending in Arizona and Georgia. And so One of the things, though, is that Trump right now, for the first time in this campaign, in the month of August, he's booked about twice as much time as Harris and the super PAC backing her. So what he's trying to do right now is to define her as quickly as he can while she gets her campaign up and running. They've got to figure out their messaging. They've got to figure out where they're spending. And he has a strategy where, he's just unloading all these ad time in all these battleground states.
Well, it's kind of interesting here. We've got multi-million-dollar ad buys on both sides. And to your point, they're both talking about the same person, Kamala Harris. This is a race to out-identify each other here. You've got Kamala Harris with a biography-style ad today. Donald Trump hitting her as failed, weak, dangerously liberal. Who wins? The messaging war.
Generally speaking, the reason why there are so many negative ads is they tend to work. Now, we haven't seen any negative ads yet from the Democrats and Kamala Harris attacking Donald Trump. And I think that some of those could be very effective with her background as a prosecutor, she can be, I think this is one of her big strengths, and also like her ability to debate. So I think that she can carry that negative message to Trump. But right now, it's, I think it should be a concern for Democrats that, he's got so much on the air and they're behind right now.
And just quickly, Bill, before we let you go, you had a great piece out today looking at one big donor in particular, Ken Griffin, donating a lot to Republicans in congressional races. Not yet to Donald Trump, though.
He has stayed out of presidential politics really since 2016, although he did get in. He gave $5 million to Nikki Haley's super PAC. So I shouldn't leave that out. But most of his emphasis has been on congressional races, and he's been spending a lot in primaries trying to shape the kinds of candidates who will come into Congress. And he's looking, broadly speaking, he's looking for candidates who will restore the American dream or extend the American dream. And he's talking about national defense, taxes, business opportunities, and things like that. But, yeah, he's put about $75 million into political campaigns so far this cycle.
Fascinating story with a lot more money to be spent. Great reporting. Bill, Allison, thank you so much. The Senate, meantime, passed the Kids Online Safety Act today. Yes, senators are still in town and working. This is a bill that would require social media companies make their platforms safer for kids. The measure now heads to an uncertain future in the House. We talked about it with a big supporter of this legislation, Republican Senator Marsha Blackburn, on the earlier balance of power.
There is broad bipartisan support across the body of the House for pushing this forward. I think that you will see House leadership move it to the floor for a vote, and we will get this to the president's desk. There has been an unbelievable coalition of parents and school principals and educators and pediatricians and kids that have said there need to be protections in the virtual space so that we are not subjected to some of these algorithmic rabbit trails.
Joining us now for more, Megan Scully, who leads Bloomberg's congressional coverage. Megan, I don't know about the algorithmic rabbit trails, but there are questions about whether there's a trail here in the House for this bill. What do you think?
So Speaker Johnson has said that he would read the legislation and consider bringing it up. Now, the House is on recess, though, for the next 6 weeks or so, and they're going to be back in September when they have crunch time to get spending legislation done, and lawmakers are going to be eager to return home to campaign once again. So we'll see if this gets through. It has been sort of languishing in the House since the spring, but there is a strong impetus because of the coalition that Senator Blackburn mentioned. There is, however, also a push against it. Groups like the ACLU are concerned about censorship. Tech companies are not behind it. So it is by no means a certainty.
Well, and of course, it's not a certainty either that the Senate will be able to pass more legislation this week when the tax compromise that passed in the House by a wide bipartisan margin goes to the floor. But, Megan, we also have our eye on some congressional primary races, specifically in Arizona today, the 8th congressional district. How close is this one going to be?
That one is going to be close. These primaries that are going on in Arizona are so notable for many reasons, including just the sheer number of candidates on both sides in the various districts. The interesting thing about this race is that Donald Trump has endorsed not one but two Republican candidates, both of whom have lost statewide in the last election cycle. You have Blake Masters, who lost the Senate race in 22, and Abe Hamday, who lost the state attorney general race. Trump is a sort of a latecomer to the Masters campaign this time around, so it'll be interesting to see how his sort of last-minute double endorsement plays in that district.